Whoever forgets their own mortality has already become a ghost among the living. Martin Heidegger. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. The city hums like a colossal ventilator, keeping its sleepers alive. At dawn, the same gray alarm pierces every apartment, an electronic rooster crowing on schedule. Eyes open, yet vision remains veiled. Fingers swipe across glass to greet the feed, a shimmering river of fabricated urgencies. Headlines thunder about crises crafted to steal breath. Influencers rehearse smiles that never reach their pupils. Advertisements whisper that absence can be cured with another purchase. The orchestra is vast, perfectly tuned so that no single note invites reflection. Each scroll of the thumb is another shovelful of earth on the coffin of inner life. School once taught the alphabet of obedience. Raise a hand only when invited. Color inside approved outlines. Trade daydreams for gold stars. Later, the office refines the ritual. Fluorescent lights replicate daylight. Calendars dictate every heartbeat. Productivity dashboards rank souls by output. Nobody orders the heart to slow, yet it slows. Nobody commands the gaze to dim, yet it dims. Laughter drifts through corridors like canned fragrance, masking the sour scent of longing. The system needs workers who move, not beings who burn. Even leisure is engineered tranquility. Streaming platforms serve narrative anesthesia, episodes designed to end just before hunger awakens, prompting the next dose. Social channels reward the masked performance. Smile wider, filter deeper, chase hearts glowing crimson on a screen yet cold to the touch. A satire of connection replaces the storm of true encounter. Meanwhile, the body whispers through muscle tension, through the sudden tremor at midnight, through dreams that crack the drywall of consciousness. The whisper says, "You are not here." The whisper says, "Something essential has gone missing." The whisper is silenced by one more clip, one more scroll, one more midnight snack glimmering beneath supermarket neon. News anchors announce the day's tragedies with practiced serenity. Stocks tumble, forests burn, distant lives shatter, yet the anchor's tie remains immaculate. Disaster becomes decor, calibrated to evoke just enough fear to keep viewers glued, never enough to move them to revolt. A citizen stirred to act is unpredictable. A citizen frozen in dread is infinitely profitable. Thus fear is portioned like rations, precisely measured, endlessly renewed. Billboards loom above highways, chanting, "You are incomplete." The color of desire changes each season, but the vacancy beneath never fills. Shopping malls glow like cathedrals to the holy absence. Within them, wandering spirits trade hours of life for tokens that promise identity, yet identity cannot be bought, only remembered. The more the promise fails, the stronger the compulsion grows. This is the perfect prison. Its bars are invisible, its wardens disguised as choices. Yet within the hush of compulsory comfort, a faint pulse remains. It beats when you pause at a window and feel a sorrow you cannot name. It beats when the sunset stains office towers blood red, and for a breath, the schedule falters. It beats when music stirs tears you hide even from yourself. That pulse is not approved content. It is the raw script written before the program installed its updates. It thrums with forbidden electricity, demanding a life unscripted, a presence unmediated. To awaken, you need no permission slip. Power lies in the smallest revolt. Closing the feed, letting silence roar, walking without headphones through street noise that is not curated. Each act of unfiltered perception widens the fracture in the facade. Speak a thought that trembles in the throat, and the algorithm shudders. Share a truth without polishing it for applause, and sponsored illusions lose their grip. Turn your gaze inward during the interminable meeting, and the clock's tyranny weakens. These gestures seem trivial, yet they are sparks on dry straw. The system dreads fire more than it desires profit. Remember the simple, scandalous fact: breath is yours, Attention is yours. Time is yours. No corporation, government, or tribe can own what resides behind your ribs unless you sign the lease in apathy. When you refuse, the machinery stalls for a heartbeat. Enough refusals, and gears grind to a halt. The dead walk among us, not because the Reaper claimed them, but because they surrendered their witness. They traded the storm of being for the drizzle of distraction. They let the program dictate the shape of their days, until even their dreams streamed in sponsored segments. They forgot the one thing the system cannot counterfeit: the wild ache that declares, "I am alive." Nurture that ache. Feed it raw moments, untamed silence, unfenced roads. Guard it as a sacred ember. A life reclaimed may appear reckless to the orderly. You will miss updates, skip promotions, decline invitations to polished funerals for wonder. Yet in the quiet glare of your own restored eyes, you will know the trade was just. For when presence returns, deathful sense returns. Death loses its camouflage. You stand within the city's mechanical breath and feel your own pulse thunder louder. And in that thunder, the program cracks. Morning rush floods narrow streets with bodies moving like programmed cells inside a vein of asphalt. Each footfall echoes the same silent command: comply. The schedule is carved before the first sip of coffee. Meetings march one behind another. Calendars sync across devices glowing like private altars. Wrist screens vibrate gentle reminders that autonomy is overdue. In this theater of urgency, every part arrives with a costume: polite colleague, reliable partner, respectable citizen. None of these garments fits the soul, yet the wardrobe is mandatory. Behind each mask, a silence grows wider, a silence mistaken for peace, though it feels far closer to absence. That absence is the first toll of the hidden bell announcing living death. News feeds surge beneath fingertips as though the planet were a conveyor belt of curated calamities. A cyclone in a distant land flashes across glass, then a performer confesses heartbreak, then a sale vanishes at midnight. Emotional whiplash becomes muscle memory. The mind cannot linger, cannot mourn, cannot rebel. Swallow the headline, chase it with a joke, numb the aftertaste with an advert promising everlasting youth in a jar. Tragedy and comedy blend into a single bland flavor prepared to pacify an addict. Information turns to sedation, and the spell deepens. Social platforms refine the leash. An unseen algorithm measures every hesitation, weighs each desire, then serves a mirror engineered to flatter and imprison. Post the approved image and applause rushes through glowing hearts. Reveal vulnerability and the applause dims. The lesson is plain: polish a persona, nourish the hive, never step outside the predetermined palette. Meanwhile, the authentic self drifts beneath like a forgotten island, its beaches eroded by tides of borrowed attention. Every like removes one more grain of sand. Education completes the architecture of captivity. From early years, children memorize chronicles of distant emperors, equations stripped of wonder, languages divorced from poetry. They rehearse the grammar of obedience: raise hand, repeat, regurgitate. Curiosity, that ancient spark able to burn walls to ash, is disciplined into safe compliance. By graduation, the gaze that once chased clouds now tracks spreadsheets. The metamorphosis is so gradual, it masquerades as maturity. Entertainment supplies sedation between shifts. Streaming queues never end, designed to blur the boundary between one episode and the next until night dissolves into blue glow. Virtual worlds bloom with quests that reward grind over discovery, echoing the very labor they claim to escape. The controller becomes a second set of nerves, the headset a portable portal, yet on the other side waits the same scarcity loop: chase loot, level up, repeat. Hours pass uncounted, while beyond the window a moon climbs the ridge of rooftops and sets unseen. Advertising colonizes language itself. Words like success, beauty, and freedom are branded. Patent pending. A lotion promises confidence. A sedan whispers status. A holiday vows transcendence inside tranquil resort walls. Desire is prepackaged, then sold back to its owner at compound interest. Paychecks vanish into rituals of proving worth to strangers who wander identical pilgrimages. This is not consumption. This is worship of the void. Yet cracks appear where attention falters. A commuter stares through the train window and senses the absurd choreography of bodies swaying in unison. A student fails an exam yet feels oddly light, like a puppet with one less string. A weary parent forgets the bedtime story and invents a new one instead, and wonder flares in the child's eyes. In such moments, the program glitches. Authenticity slips through, and the captive glimpses the sky beyond the dome. Liberation begins with ownership of presence. Turn off the notification before it strikes. Walk without destination and let boredom sharpen perception. Read a poem aloud, not to impress, but to taste syllables against teeth. Sit with discomfort until it names its source, and hear the quiet rebellion of unmet dreams. Create something useless, and watch usefulness beg for mercy. Speak a truth that empties the room, yet expands the soul. These gestures are fault lines, and enough fault lines topple any wall. The system relies on predictable patterns. Spontaneity short-circuits its grid. Refuse a task that starves your spirit, and silent tremors ripple through unseen circuitry. Listen to a friend without rehearsing replies, and attention returns to its rightful throne, depriving algorithms of a data point. Stand beneath unfiltered starlight, and feel ancient awe crawl up your spine. Every billboard flickers a little dimmer. To flee from being is to cooperate in your own disappearance. Retrieving being requires audacity disguised as simplicity. Breathe deeper, look longer, choose slower. In each deliberate act, you reclaim territory from the empire of haste. The heart, once anesthetized, thunders awake, a drum rallying cells to revolt. Muscles remember movement unchoreographed. Voice recovers timbre dulled by compliance. Thought regains edges the program had sanded smooth. Final surge of this chapter. Steer your days with intention. The system cannot intercept, and routine shatters like thin ice beneath summer sun. The calendar may still display meetings, yet behind every polite greeting lives a sovereign flame. Carry that flame into boardrooms, supermarkets, and crosswalks, and its light sketches exit routes for any soul ready to follow. Escape spreads not through force but through resonance, an underground melody reminding the forgetful that life was meant to blaze, not to submit. Every empire of distraction depends on a whispered lie. You will live forever if you obey the schedule. Health trackers count your heartbeats. Longevity gurus chant about biohacks. Productivity manuals promise endless growth as though the flesh were granite, as though the clock could be bribed. Screens celebrate birthdays in pastel tones, yet never mention funerals. Advertisements offer wrinkle serums beside icons of infinity. Still, beneath the neon reassurance, the body remembers a different scripture. Hair grays, joints creak, memory misplaces names, and in the hush between notifications, a tremor of truth rises. The system floods that hush with noise, for nothing threatens control like a soul that has looked into mortality and refused to flinch. Heidegger named this clear-eyed stance being toward death. It is not a morbid obsession, rather a luminous refusal to squander breath. When you stand beside an open grave, even if only in imagination, the spreadsheet loses authority, the leaderboard dims, the polished title on the office door sounds hollow. The market cannot monetize the scent of fresh earth, cannot brand the silence of a hospital corridor at midnight, cannot wrap the fact that every inhale is unrepeatable. Awareness of finitude unclamps the gears forged to keep you turning without reflection. Consider the rituals society prescribes to hide the edge. Insurance plans disguise it as paperwork. Fitness challenges cloak it in branded sweat. News banners turn it into statistics, bar charts rising and falling far from skin. Even language protects comfort, swapping the hard word, death, for clinical euphemisms such as loss, passing, closure. Each substitution builds a pillow fortress around the collective psyche, thick enough to muffle the alarm clock of existence. Yet the call persists, vibrant as thunder under the floorboards. To face death willingly is to puncture the fortress from within. Walk through a cemetery when the sun slants low and read the chiseled names until they sound like your own. Sit with an elder and listen without hastening to fix. simply absorbing the cadence of years distilled into remembrance. Hold a photograph of someone you loved who is no longer here and feel the silent guidance of their absence. These gestures peel away the insulation. Once the insulation crumbles, the hierarchy of priorities rearranges itself overnight. Status symbols drop like tin coins. Endless comparison loses flavor. You taste each bite of bread with grateful astonishment because there may be no second loaf. You lift your child or your dog or your suitcase with a tenderness born of knowing the gesture cannot be repeated in precisely the same constellation of weather and mood. This is not despair, but liberation. The system relies on denial. Acceptance short-circuits its circuitry. Fear retreats when greeted directly. The algorithm tracks rage and envy with ease, yet meets bewilderment when the metrics of fear collapse. A citizen who has accepted impermanence cannot be panicked into blind allegiance, cannot be herded by sensational headlines, cannot be baited by the promise of eternal youth in exchange for perpetual labor. Such a citizen strolls at their own tempo, speaks with deliberate heat, refuses the cult of urgency. From that refusal, a different economy blooms. Time becomes a radiant currency. Attention becomes a consecrated lens. Work shifts from ladder climbing to craft shaped by care. Relationships transform into pilgrimages walked together across swiftly dwindling miles. Even grief alters, no longer an error to correct but a symphony to feel, proof of depth rather than malfunction. Life lived in full view of death burns like a lantern in a tunnel. Others notice the glow. They sense calm in your gait, fierceness in your quiet. They ask, without asking, what fuel you carry. You answer without words, because presence speaks. Presence declares. The expiry date grants flavor. Presence insists, while breath moves through me, I will choose how to spend it. Night drapes the city in soft graphite, yet neon signs keep vigil, unwilling to let darkness speak. Still, the hush between streetlights grows dense enough for buried truths to stir. The system dreads this hour because distractions sleep and the raw pulse of conscience awakens. Out of that pulse rises the shadow, not a villain but an archivist, carrying everything disowned to survive the daylight mask. The shadow kneels beside each human sunset and gathers abandoned dreams, unshed tears, unvoiced rage, storing them in silent ledger pages. It knows every compromise made for applause, every silence maintained to avoid conflict, every grin rehearsed to hide despair. By dawn, the ledger glows like smoldering coal, and the weight of that heat presses on eyelids even as alarms declare another cycle. Media prophets label this heaviness burnout, prescribe mindfulness apps, market scented candles, promise relief in 3 clear steps. Yet the discomfort persists because it is not a glitch in the program, it is the program itself cracking. The shadow whispers through chest tightness, through sudden tears in a grocery aisle, through insomnia that scrolls past midnight. It states that the lie cannot stand forever. Algorithms cannot mute this murmur because it travels through muscle memory, breath cadence, pulse rhythm. It arrives while swiping through glamorous feeds and floods vision with an ache for unfiltered faces. It surges during corporate pep talks, revealing fluorescent rooms as cages. It blooms at family dinners when polite small talk wilts under eyes that plead for authenticity. Every visitation is an invitation to reclaim the exiled self. The system offers diversion instead. New series drop at midnight, time to the circadian lull in willpower. Sales erupt each weekend to convert restlessness into parcels on doorsteps. Wellness influencers preach positivity, declaring shadow work needless negativity. Their smiles tremble when cameras power down, yet the charade continues because insecurity pays well. Whole industries depend on citizens remaining slightly dissatisfied, yet not fully courageous. Freedom begins with turning toward the ache rather than away. Sit in a dim room without screens and let silence crawl along the walls. Breathe until the urge to escape pulses like static, then subsides. Name aloud the emotion beneath the first label, then the one beneath that, until only raw sensation remains. Rage feels hot and electric. Grief feels heavy and tidal. Shame feels like shrinking cloth on skin. None of these textures can destroy you. They simply demand acknowledgement. Dialogue with the shadow unfolds without words. A memory surfaces of childhood afternoons spent painting dragons before grades mattered. The spine straightens. Another memory surfaces of a friendship lost to ambition, and tears fall without panic. Each felt truth unhooks another chain. The heart realizes it can carry sorrow and still beat in sunlight. The mind realizes it can host rage without committing violence. The body realizes trembling is not weakness but electricity leaving a storm shelter. Small outward acts follow inner recognition. The worker who always nodded now proposes a daring idea, voice steady even as hands shake. The parent who scrolled during playtime slides the phone aside and listens to nonsensical songs composed by a laughing child. The student who feared judgment shares a poem that startles the classroom into breathless quiet. These gestures appear ordinary, yet each one amplifies a frequency incompatible with control. Communities germinate around authenticity the way moss blooms on stone. Two colleagues admit exhaustion and decide to protect lunch breaks from meetings. Three neighbors plant vegetables together and trade stories about loneliness beneath the taste of basil. Strangers at a concert sing off-key with honest ferocity until the performer drops the microphone and joins the chorus. The shadow transforms into shared twilight, binding individuals through courage rather than conformity. The system notices these changes. Metrics of engagement dip, advertisements lose bite, anxiety indices falter. New tactics emerge, louder rhetoric, brighter screens, faster deliveries. Yet every attempt feels brittle against citizens who have stared into their own darkness and chosen wholeness. Fear propaganda cannot shame someone who befriended inner monsters. Comparison bait cannot lure someone who recognizes unique rhythm. Surveillance loses power when people willingly reveal genuine hearts to one another. Shadow acceptance dismantles the interior prison bars, and once the inner cell opens, external walls crumble with quiet inevitability. A human being integrated is a constellation beyond capture, lighting corridors for others until night cannot remember why it was ever feared. Sunrise breaks over silent suburbs where recyclers collect yesterday's consumption and sparrows argue across satellite dishes. In living rooms, polite curtains frame the glow of dawn, yet inside, many hearts, twilight persists. The system spins a subtle fairy tale. Hold on tighter, and safety blooms. Invest more hours, and happiness crystallizes. Upgrade your profile, and the ache dissolves. Holding, investing, upgrading, layers of accumulation that finally suffocate movement. When the shadow's whisper swells into thunder, accumulation feels unbearable. That weight is the entrance to voluntary death. Not the ending of breath, but the ending of pretending. Decor of status, archive of achievements, schedules packed with obligations never loved. Each item becomes tinder once honesty lights a match. Picture emptying a wardrobe and discovering garments bought only for meetings that drain spirit. Picture deleting folders of unfinished reports and realizing the sky outside shifted color countless times while templates devoured the hours. Picture scrolling through contacts and sensing how many greetings masked silent dread. Every picture cracks a floorboard beneath the architecture of identity. The creak invites demolition, not repair. Grief arrives unannounced, wearing many masks. There is grief for hours traded for coins, for friendships neglected while chasing applause, for corners of the inner world never explored. The system preaches outrunning grief with fresh goals. Liberation listens instead. Sit on the floor among discards. Let regret flood muscles. Let tears carve channels across cheeks. Grief is a river clearing debris so that new roots grip fertile ground. Fire follows flood. With each surrendered role, sparks rise. The former executive who resigns before another season of hollow targets. The athlete who stops punishing knees to fit a brand. The caregiver who finally rests after epics of compulsory smile. Every act of release feeds a communal blaze. Flames consume the illusion that worth equals productivity. Ash settles, soft and fertile. Silence returns, yet it is no longer the silence of resignation. It is the hush after lightning, saturated with ion scent, ripe with possibility. Into this hush steps the unadorned self, barefoot, unhurried, alert. Breath deepens. Attention widens. Decision sprouts from inner soil rather than external command. Outer noise still chatters but sounds distant, almost comedic. The liberated one engages the world, yet refuses bondage. Work becomes craft shaped by curiosity. Money turns from idol to instrument. Technology shifts from overlord to servant. Leisure no longer numbs, it nourishes. Relationships evolve into open fields where honesty runs without fences. Every realm, once dominated by fear, now glimmers with intentional presence. The system does not applaud these transformations. It replies with subtle sabotage, tempting returns, guilt-saturated messages, dire forecasts of failure. Sabotage fails when identity no longer clings to opinions of strangers. A person who has allowed the old self to die possesses a freedom that cannot be repossessed. Debt collectors of shame knock on an unlocked door and find the house empty of fear. This freedom radiates, invisible yet unmistakable. Passers-by sense it in posture relaxed yet upright, in eyes bright without frenzy. Some feel envy, some feel wonder, some feel sudden courage. Seeds disperse. Another soul realizes they too may abandon obligations that drain spirit. Another picks up a paintbrush forgotten since childhood. Another closes the laptop and steps into rain bareheaded, letting water baptize a fresh path. Death as liberation is not a single ceremony, but a rhythm. Inhale, release, inhale, release. Across seasons, old skins shed, new skins form. Then they too fall when the moment ripens. Life resembles a serpent glimmering through cycles, rather than a monument carved once. The system cannot map this rhythm. It prefers straight lines and permanent labels. Each time another layer slips away, you vanish from its grid once more. Practical gestures anchor liberation in daily texture. Donate clothes that carry no living story, leaving space for garments chosen with care. Cook a simple meal with bare hands instead of tapping a screen for delivery, tasting herbs that sprouted on the windowsill. Wander unfamiliar streets without a digital map, trusting instinct to compose the route. Write a letter on paper and feel the drag of ink translate thought into tangible trace. Each gesture trains muscles to remember sovereignty, teaching nerves that life unfolds beyond curated pipelines. When the false self crumbles, breath enters chambers long sealed, and the heart, no longer hostage, beats a drum that summons every dormant dream to stand upright and stride into daylight. Dusk drapes the city in copper smoke. Streetlights flicker awake, yet inside the awakened heart, dawn still burns. After shadow work and self-funeral, the liberated self does not settle into calm neutrality. It ignites. Flame becomes the native element, not to scorch but to illuminate, to warm forgotten seeds, to cauterize lingering wounds. Fire is intensity governed by wisdom. It crackles through language when speech rises from marrow rather than script, turning casual chatter into living spark. It colors gestures so that a simple handshake carries current, so that laughter rolls deeper than politeness and lingers after silence. Presence once dulled by routine now glows like hearth embers in a cold hall, drawing strangers closer without demand. Energy no longer leaks into comparison or worry. Attention condenses into a beam that melts false obstacles. Tasks once endured for approval transform into expressions of character. Cooking supper, writing code, mending a neighbor's fence, each act gleams with wholeheartedness, a blaze of here and now. Outcome matters less than the vivid honesty of engagement. Even rest feels vivid. Sleep descends like a velvet curtain after a theater of flames, deep and restorative, free of anxious flicker. Fire refuses to hoard, it shares by nature. The artist leaves a mural on a crumbling wall, brightening commutes for unseen travelers. The gardener gifts tomatoes grown without chemicals, trading flavor for conversation. The dancer records a short clip in an empty warehouse, feet tapping messages of defiance against sterile silence. Giving becomes effortless because the source feels inexhaustible, a living spring under volcanic stone. Yet flame needs tending. Embers fade if smothered by excess obligation or neglected by forgetfulness. The awakened one learns rhythms of maintenance. Dawn begins with breath slow as molten glass. Night closes with gratitude whispered into pillow darkness. Boundaries form like fire rings, keeping sparks from scattering where fuel is damp. Saying no turns into an act of conservation, preserving heat for meaningful logs. Community evolves around such hearths. Kindred souls recognize one another by the glow in the eyes, by grounded excitement in the voice. They gather without hierarchy, each bringing a distinct hue of flame. Dialogue resembles jazz, improvisation woven with attentive pauses. Conflict, when it erupts, is met with curiosity rather than conquest, for the circle knows friction reveals hidden timber ready to burn brighter. Institutions anchored in fear struggle to respond. Marketing campaigns attempt to mimic authenticity, yet flicker unnaturally, like neon imitating candlelight. Bureaucracies draft policies to quantify passion, measuring sparks per minute, filing compliance forms. Their efforts collapse under the simple truth that living fire cannot be graphed. It can only be felt. Living as flame does not promise serene days. Storms still arrive, losses still cut, betrayal still stings. Yet fire metabolizes these elements, turning heartbreak into radiant compassion, turning setback into forge heat that tempers resolve. Pain enters the kiln and exits as deeper color, richer resonance. Nothing is wasted. Everything feeds the blaze. This mode of being rewrites the social fabric. Children raised near flames of presence learn by example that joy is not a commodity. Elders warmed by such heat recall long-buried tales, gifting oral history back to communal memory. Streets lit by authentic vitality grow safer. For people who feel alive, protect life instinctively. Even landscapes benefit when residents steward soil with reverent enthusiasm instead of extractive numbness. Practice anchors principle. Choose a daily task and perform it at the pace of reverence, as though the universe leans closer to watch. Thank the kettle for steam before pouring tea. Offer a compliment that kindles another's ember. Step outside at midnight and match breathing to cricket rhythm. Each humble ritual adds kindling, keeping core temperature bright. Fire never chases darkness. It exists, and night rearranges itself. Live as that flame, and the mechanized world loses claim upon your hours. Live as that flame, and every footstep etches a bright trail across the maplessness of existence, guiding wanderers home to their own waiting embers. We're sure you've discovered plenty of value, so subscribe now and stay connected.